Sorry about that. So my name is Aneta Cameron, and I'm a disability justice activist. I live in Rochester, New York. My pronouns are she, hers, although I consider myself androgynous and queer. Um, I am a black woman with caramel colored skin, long locks, but actually I'm wearing a hoodie and that's up, and I have earphones over the hoodie so that I can hear. I'm in my bedroom, and in the background is the disability flag, sorry, that flag, and try to position to see if you can see it. Um, anyway, for descriptive purposes, it's an American flag in the field, the dark blue field. In the field, the stars are arranged in the shape of a figure in a wheelchair. So that's me. I'm 58, and I've been involved in disability justice and disability rights for 37 years, and been doing activism for 42 years. So I'll stop there.
How did you get involved with social justice?
One, I just turned 21. I was living in Chicago, and I had my own place, but I was chilling with my godmother, who was a nun, Catholic nun. She got a phone call while I was there, and we were pretty tight, so I was listening to her phone call. And the person who was calling her was wanting to know if she knew someone who could be an attendant and an interpreter for a disabled guy who he was a disabled activist, and he traveled around the country, and um, he had just lost his attendant and interpreter, and he needed someone. And did she know someone who could apply for the job? And so after my godmother got off the call, my godmother's Sister Ann Mayer, um, she's a nun with she's with the Order of School Sisters of Notre Dame. Um, and they are the ones that actually got me involved in social justice um, when I was 16. But in the meantime, I gone off on many adventures and gotten my own place, and I was there chilling with Sister Ann, and she got this call, and she turned around to me and she said, Aneta, your life is so adventurous. You have so many adventures in your life, Aneta. Why don't you call this person up and talk to him and see if you could get the job? So I said, okay. So this guy, his name was Dennis Schreiber. And Dennis, he was deaf blind, and he used a wheelchair. And his wife, Jackie, would interpret for him. And he used a form of communication called finger spelling. Um, and he didn't use ASL. There are many different types of sign language. A lot of people think ASL. There's sign exact English, which is what Dennis used. There's pigeon sign English. There's all kinds of stuff. And so, um, because he was deafblind, there's specific form of communications. But I digress. So I called up this guy, and his wife Jackie got on the phone, and Dennis could, he could speak. Um, I was able to understand him. He definitely had a deaf accent, but I was able to understand him. And Jackie would interpret. So whatever I said, so it's just like anybody else, you're talking whatever. And so, we talked about ourselves. We had a lot in common, including the fact that he was Catholic, so we had that in common. That we had done social justice work, so we had that in common. And then he proceeded to give me a spelling test, 10 words. And I got them all correct, and he was really surprised. Couldn't believe it. So he gave me another spelling test. I got that, 100%. Couldn't believe it. Gave me another spelling test. And I passed. And so he hired me on the spot. And it turned out that he worked at the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. And so I interviewed with the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind, and my title was Rehabilitation Service Aide. So, in addition to working for dentists, I taught cane technique to other blind folks because, born, uh, low vision, blind, and taught like forms of occupational therapy, um, and but my main job was with dentists. And Dennis's main thing was he worked with he raised money. He was a hellacious fundraiser, and he had formed and um, created this group called DARE, Disabled Americans Rally for Equality. And DARE was the sister chapter of a disability organization called ADAPT. So Chicago ADAPT was so huge that we literally had two ADAPT chapters. And so there were ADAPT folks on the north side. They lived mostly on the north side, and they they tended to be, more like professional folks, and whatnot. Most of them were white. They lived in richy areas, but they were ADAPT members. And then we had the South Side crew, which I was a part of, and we were huge, and it was largely Dennis led that pretty much, and we were mostly black and Puerto Rican and poorer white folks. We lived mostly on the south side. Um, we were, we lived mostly like, I'm not gonna lie, we lived mostly in the ghetto. Okay, we lived mostly in high rises. I think so. By the time I joined the DAP, like I was living on the west side, in a neighborhood called Austin. And your dad is from Chicago, right?
Yes, my dad is from Chicago, and he lived off of Oakland growing up.
Neighborhood where Shell Trap did his organizing. hmm And so I didn't get to meet.
My dad and Shell Trap were childhood friends back off in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, yeah. So I lived in the neighborhood where Shell first did his organizing. And so I got up with Dennis and with Adapt, and Dennis was a hellacious fundraiser. and he sold buttons. He sold like adapt buttons. That was how we raised the money to go on adapt accents. Except that when I joined adapt in 1986, Dennis was my boss, and Dennis, he would not allow me to go on national accents, but I went on all the local accents, you know, and that was just the way Dennis was. Dennis was kind of Dennis was legendary. All the old school old heads knew Dennis, and Dennis had a reputation. Dennis was a bit of an can I we all adults here, right? I can okay. So Dennis was a bit of an asshole. Okay, Dennis um he had a way with women. So a lot of the old folks, like Kafka and whatnot, always say, "I remember that little girl with Dennis," because I was just a tiny little thing. Like I said, I had just turned 21. I was very, very quiet. Y'all don't believe that now, but when I first joined Adapt, I was a little quiet, little mousy thing, barely spoke above a whisper, dealt with Dennis and his hands, and the fact that he was a general asshole, but he was a phenomenal organizer and a phenomenal fundraiser, and he knew Wade Blank. And as a matter of fact, how I met Wade was Wade came to like Chicago. Chicago DAP used to have these big, and Dare used to have these big like year-end meetings in December. And you gotta understand, when I joined ADAPT, so I was born with my disabilities, but I was mainstream from nursery school up. And so I was not around other disabled folks. I went through nursery school, preschool, elementary school, high school, college, all without having been around disabled people. I'd meet somebody here and there. When I uh, got involved in social justice at 16, still, I worked in a variety of movements up until I joined ADAPT. And when I joined ADAPT, the biggest thing was I it was the first time I had been around a bunch of disabled people. And I fit right in. I felt right at home. These was my people. It also was the first time that I had been involved in social justice where it was diverse. So like usually the other um, movement that I had joined, like peace and justice, anti-nuclear, anti-apartheid, um, LGBTQ, I was either the only black, like in like the anti-nuclear peace and justice stuff, or I was the only disabled, which pretty much the other movements, or I was the only black and disabled. But when I joined ADAPT, I fit right in because we had everybody, you name it, we had it. Black, white, Latinx, Native American, Asian, we were a rainbow. And like back then, it was still kind of like, we talking the 80s, and it was still kind of dangerous, to be out gay. And you got to understand, when I was 21, two major things I did. I came out on my 21st birthday, which happened in Chicago, was Pride Day. June is Pride Month. Pride Day fell on my birthday that year. And so I came out publicly.
This is where we are going to end for today, and we are going to pick our conversation with Aneta up next week. Like this video and please subscribe to my channel.